Christopher Nolan has achieved a status very few filmmakers get to experience. Essentially at the top of the Hollywood food chain, he is able to make any movie he wants. He is probably the only filmmaker working in the system right now who gets carte blanche. Even the godfather of blockbusters himself, Steven Spielberg, barely got his Lincoln film into theaters. It almost went to HBO. He was only able to clear a path to theaters because he co-owns his own studio. Nolan doesn't own a studio and still doesn't seem to encounter this problem. To be fair, the kinds of films he seems to want to make happen to be big budget blockbusters with plenty of action in them. The kinds of movies Hollywood likes to get behind. Still, Nolan is living in rarefied air and is probably the envy of most other filmmakers. This isn't going to be much of a film review, but more of an examination of what Nolan's latest film represents for the state of the theatrical movie business in a time where it's never been more in danger of disappearing, or at least radically changing from what it's been for the past 100 years. My issues with Tenet are echoed in many other reviews, mainly that the film is shockingly incoherent for large chunks of its runtime, not only with regard to the plot, but the actual audibility of the dialogue during scenes of heavy exposition. To say that Tenet's plot is complex would be an extreme understatement. Out of all of Nolan's films, Tenet's plot is by far the most sophisticated, but there is a fine line between complex and convoluted, and Tenet firmly plants itself in the latter camp. I saw Tenet in an empty theater, something I quite enjoyed, and the volume was shockingly loud. So loud I had to ask management to turn it down. Even then, it was apparent that the mix felt boosted to an unnatural degree. The irony is that even with a loud mix, the dialogue is often totally inaudible. During scenes where the film's plot is being explained, I was frustrated by my inability to understand what was being said. As a result, I felt less like a participant in the story and more like an outsider looking through a foggy, dirty storefront window into a place where lots of interesting things were happening, but of which I could barely comprehend. Even still, the film is relentless in its pacing and stacking of action sequences that get more complex as the story unfolds. By the end, when soldiers stormed the battlefield in the film's climactic set piece, I had no idea who was who they were shooting at, or what exactly it was they were doing there. The awe-inspiring spectacle of it all, with its expensive-looking stunts, trippy visuals, and special effects, weren't enough to make up for what was a confusing mess of a movie. I left the theater stunned at how boldly Nolan seemed to invest in essentially creating a movie that only he understood. The audience didn't seem to matter. Nolan had his fun, and we had paid the price of admission to make up for all of the money he spent. Except it wasn't enough. Tenet bombed. Nolan seemed to insist the film be released in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, with many flabbergasted as to why a studio who'd spent over $200 million on the film would take such a risky gamble in releasing a film audiences clearly weren't going to show up for in the droves necessary to make a profit. But Nolan insisted that it was some kind of urgent mission to save the theatrical experience. This is an odd opinion, considering the film, as I said before, is borderline incoherent. Was Nolan really expecting a movie so hell-bent on shutting out the audience to save the theatrical experience? If anything, many people preferred to wait for the home video release so that they could turn on the subtitles and understand what was going on. A friend of mine and I were having a conversation about the state of movies and comparing them to television. He has decidedly taken the side of television, using Tenet as an example of what's wrong with the movies. A film clearly with a lot on its mind, but constrained by a 2.5-hour runtime. Imagine Tenet as a miniseries where Nolan would have had the opportunity to expand his ideas, take time telling the story, and not rush to pack in as much plot information as possible in such a short amount of time. Maybe Tenet would have been a better experience as a TV show. And as far as saving movie theaters, their fate was sealed the moment they decided the quality of exhibition didn't matter as much as the money they were raking in. With many theaters suffering from dim screens, blown speakers, unclean auditoriums, outrageous concession prices, and a refusal to do anything about the epidemic of talkers and texters. Alamo Drafthouse got it right. Talk or text and you will be likely shown the door. Drafthouse is one of the few chains, if not the only chain, to make talking and texting a practically bannable offense. The other theater chains never seem to care. Is it any wonder audiences aren't in any hurry to return to an experience that was honestly more of a ripoff than a pleasure? Especially with the sky-high price of movie tickets these days, and Hollywood's increasing reliance on shallow, empty spectacle. No, the theaters are being shown an act of karma, it seems. Streaming is now all the rage. With the world forced to stay home, their televisions have become the centers of their entertainment experience. Studios had already started their own streaming services, and the few holdouts will probably take advantage of the new streaming gold rush and cut out the middleman entirely. Essentially, the studios have theaters exactly where they want them, over a barrel, and the arrogance of the theater chains with their disregard for the audience dovetails perfectly into Nolan's latest film, and its almost complete lack of regard for the same audiences. Nolan now finds himself at the top of a pyramid that may no longer matter, basically sitting atop of a pile of gold that can't be spent. Even when the current worldwide situation finds a solution, the economic fallout will likely be so catastrophic that we may never reach a sense of normalcy again. At least anything resembling the world we once knew. Theaters are cash poor, and most of them don't seem to have the ability to keep the lights on if audiences can't or won't show up. The theatrical landscape will likely never go back to normal. Even if there are theatrical releases, the budgets will likely be considerably smaller in order to compensate for the lack of audiences. The days of $200 million blockbusters may be a thing of the past. Perhaps this will give Nolan a chance to reset, slow down, and go back to his more intimate storytelling style. I still think Memento is his best film, and it happens to be not only one of his smallest, but a film that presented complex ideas in a clear, precise delivery. Memento works because the film is designed with the audience in mind. Back then, Nolan had to make those concessions because he was a nobody and had everything to prove. Now that he's famous, with nothing left to prove, does he still care about the audiences that supported him and allowed him to rise to the top? Perhaps his next film will answer this question. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like and subscribe button, as I'll be posting more content in the future. Thanks for watching.